All right. Don't see Nita yet. All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Lynn Nguyen. Welcome to our virtual Career Day series. I am the young adult librarian at Chinatown Branch Library. I'm here with my co-host today, Jessica Levy from Palisades. Say hi, Jessica. She's waving. And we also have Don Nishimoto from Robertson Branch. Say hi, Don. He's right up there. We're so excited to have you here for our weekly virtual Career Day series where we introduce amazing careers to you. Today, we have 3 guest speakers from the field of law and advocacy. We also have another special guest here today, which may be popping in later. I don't see, oh, I do see her. All right, we do have a very special guest speaker here today as well. Her name is Nita Lelyveld. She's an LA Times columnist. She will be observing this event for a possible story. Please let me know if you do not wish to be quoted. Thank you, Nita, for joining us here today. Before we begin, I would like to go over some housekeeping rules. Your microphones are already muted, so you do not need to have your videos turned on as well. Recording is in progress. You can limit distractions by having your window as full screen. If you do wish to ask questions at any time during the program, you can type that into the chat box and we'll try to ask that question for you. Or if you have a specific question, you can wait till our Q&A towards the end. We will allow you to unmute yourself. We ask that you be respectful of everyone and to keep your comments in the chat box related to today's program. Personal views and anything that may be offensive will cause you to be removed from our program. We hope that you enjoyed today's Career Day. Please remember to complete 2 very short surveys that we'll be linking in the chat box. So I'd like to start off the program with the quote by the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. So with that being said, I'd like to ask you all to open up your chat box. The popcorn question for today is, what does social justice mean to you? What does social justice mean to you? So you can go ahead and type that in the chat box. And then I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Jessica Levy.
Hey, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Thank you, Lynn. I don't see anything in the chat yet.
Maybe they're all typing it up. They have very long answers.
Fairness, okay. There's no wrong answer, you guys. Okay, well, a just and equitable world. Thank you, Dawn. Everybody is treated equally. Here we go. So our first guest today is Talia Inlender. I'm very happy to have her here today. She's a supervising senior staff attorney with the Immigrants Rights Project at Public Counsel, which is based here in Los Angeles. Talia was also raised in LA. So as you're seeing these responses coming in, do these responses match up with things that you think would propel someone into a career in law?
Absolutely. I'm really enjoying reading this chat. I'm sorry if my eyes are turned in an awkward direction, but I'm loving seeing what's coming up here. Empathy, equality, inclusion. I mean, these are all of the things that drew me to this work, and I think drive me and the people that I work with every day to keep doing it. So this is fantastic to see so many people in tune.
Yeah. So can we start by learning more about what you do, where you work, Public Counsel, and how long have you been there?
Sure. So I work at Public Counsel. It's one of the largest legal nonprofits in the country. And I have been working there for almost 12 years. It'll be 12 years in October. So I've been there quite a while, almost my entire career. And I am a supervising senior staff attorney in the Immigrants Rights Project there. I started off actually as a fellow. I came in as what's called an Equal Justice Works fellow, and then I have stayed on and transitioned to a staff attorney, senior attorney, supervising, lots of different words. They just keep adding to my titles. I've been there for about 12 years. And my focus really since the start has been, when I first came in to launch our work on behalf of immigrants in detention who are held in detention centers, which is just another word for jails. And I have continued to grow and now supervise our work on behalf of immigrants in detention, as well as now deported veterans as well.
That's amazing work that you're doing, and I'm sure you've been very busy in the last several years. Right now, are there any projects, or what projects are you working on at this time, or what kind of cases are you taking on specifically? What would you like to share with us?
Well, we have been really busy. It has been an eventful 4 years. I will say though, again, I've been there about 12. So I've been through a couple of administrations now. And I think one thing I like to remind people of is, this administration has, has been horrendous for immigrants in so many different ways. But the problems didn't start with this administration, and they're not going to end with this administration. The immigration detention in particular as a problem sort of ballooned in the mid 90s, in 1996, because some laws were passed that were actually signed by President Clinton that purported to require people to be detained during the course of their removal proceedings. And it went from being something that was very rarely done to having now upwards of sometimes over 50,000 people on any given day being held in jail cells across the country, who are not in criminal proceedings, right? Who are not there because, in the criminal justice system, but have lost their liberty simply because they're going through these administrative processes. So it's a horrendous system, and we fight against it in all different types of ways. It has become even worse with this administration. The numbers have gone up, the conditions have worsened. Private prison companies have sort of ballooned, and so conditions have gotten really bad. And in particular, the pandemic has made things quite challenging. So, whereas, we were day in and day out actually physically in the detention centers, that hasn't been possible since March. So we've had to readjust and recalibrate and find new ways and create more, creative ways to continue to connect with our clients. And our focus right now is really on liberation, is really trying to free as many people as possible. And our work focuses primarily at the Adelanto Detention Center right now, which is about 2 hours east of LA in San Bernardino County. It is one of the largest detention facilities in the country, and it is in LA's backyard. It is our local detention center. And we are, and unfortunately, as we speak, just about a week and a half ago, we learned that a COVID outbreak has erupted at the facility and is now spreading. And so, we've been focusing for months and months on trying to prevent this from happening and trying to get as many people out as possible before this inevitable thing happened. And now we are, continuing to try to get people out and give people support as we, as they're now, their lives are at risk.
Wow. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all of them too. How, just to give us a better idea, there are a lot of high school students in our audience today. What does, and I know it's different now, as you've been saying, due to COVID, you're presumably working from home most of the time. So what does your day-to-day work life look like?
Yeah, it's really changed. It's changed, and also it's changed over the course of my career. It's changed over the course, obviously, of the last 6 months. And I think it's something that is important to think about also as you're thinking about sort of what you want to do in your job. At the beginning of my career, I was going into the detention centers usually at least twice, sometimes more than that, a week, teaching, doing Know Your Rights classes. I started a little Know Your Rights program at a detention facility down in Orange County. And I was in and out of the jails a couple times a week, teaching, meeting with clients, and then going into court and representing them. So it was a lot of moving around. And as I've moved into more of a supervisory position, I work with now a team of amazing attorneys, a paralegal, and when we're lucky, a social worker. To serve our clients. So I'm quarterbacking more. So sometimes I still, end up, I still go to the detention centers, or before COVID, I did on a regular basis to stay in touch with my own clients and stay in touch with the work. But I'm not quite as often there. So now it's a little bit more meetings, reviewing reviewing all of the documents that we're filing in court, participating in advocacy coalitions, thinking about strategies, not only legal strategies, but also policy strategies, impact litigation strategies, to try to advance some of the things we're hoping to see.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I wanted to find out more. I know your career spanned over a decade so far. What have been some of the highlights in your career thus far?
So many. I've been so lucky. I've been really, really lucky. I mean, one of the things I've most loved doing is the teaching and being on the ground. And I think one of the great joys of this work is being able to meet with such incredible people from all over the world, from all different types of experiences, at such a vulnerable moment in their experiences, and being able to hopefully offer some kind of help, support, and in some cases just like humanity and dignity. And in turn, like, I have learned so much resilience from the people that I have worked with, and so much about different cultures and different life experiences, and how to survive and how to thrive under what seemed like impossible circumstances. So I think, just some of my individual clients, but I did have one huge win relatively early in my career that's really stood out. When I, about a year into my working in the jails, I got a call from an ICE officer, actually, shockingly, who said, I heard you started working in the facility, and I was wondering if you'd meet with this person who's detained there. He's been detained, and he's been detained a long time, and I don't think anybody's helping him. And I said, sure, happy to meet with anybody. And I said, well, just out of curiosity, how long is a long time? And he said, well, almost 5 years. I thought, whoa, something is really, really off. So I said, of course, he had not come to my program before. And it turned out the man, whose name is Jose Franco Gonzalez, he was 29 when I met him, but he had the mental capacity of a 2 to 3 year old by some scales. And he had basically been forgotten about. He had not been in court in nearly 5 years because of his mental disability. A judge had sort of what's called administratively closed his case, so they put it on the back burner. And then he sat in jail. The government took the position he wasn't eligible for bond because he had a criminal conviction, but they also weren't doing anything to move his case forward. And he sat for almost 5 years. And by the time that I met him, and his case transformed my life and also really ended up transforming the law. So we fought. I was a very young attorney at this time, and really determined to get him out. And so we filed something called a Habeas Petition, which is a petition in the federal court to get him released, because the government, even though they pointed him out to me, would not agree to release him without litigation. And as soon as we filed the lawsuit, they agreed to release him and said, okay, the case is over. And we said, it's really not. He's not the only one. There's no system for identifying people with mental disabilities in the system. There's no system for then helping them to get a lawyer, or helping their proceedings to move along. And so his case became a class action lawsuit that I litigated over the next almost 10 years. I'm still a part of with co-counsel from ACLU, Northwest Immigrants Rights Project, and others. And it is the first case in the country and ever to establish a right to counsel, right to appointed counsel in immigration proceedings. And it does that for people with mental disabilities who are not competent to represent themselves. So that's really been a big highlight of my career, and it's now amazing to watch people get appointed counsel and people across the country talk about the case and talk about Franco, and going back to just that first year as a baby attorney, meeting him in the facility. So yeah, that's been probably.
That's wonderful. And to talk, I guess, to take a step back, to go back to before you were a law student, maybe to when you were in high school, were you already considering doing this kind of work as a career?
I don't know. I do remember in 8th grade, maybe you remember this too, Jessica, and I'll disclose that we went to junior high and high school together.
Yes.
Here in Los Angeles, at LA Public Schools, and we had to write about what we wanted to be. And I think I did write that I wanted to be a constitutional lawyer, but then I subsequently forgot about that. That was 8th grade. And no, I wasn't somebody who knew, like, going to college, that law school was what I wanted to do. It became clear to me actually after college, when I was doing sort of I was doing kind of more international and public health work, and realized I really wanted to have a job and a skill that were like much more client-based, that were a little bit more micro instead of macro, at least at the start of my career. I felt like I kind of jumped into kind of big picture issues without having the grounding in more individual experiences. So I think that's kind of when it came together for me, but maybe there was always an inkling of that, since I did write about it in Miss Wong Hopman's 8th grade
Miss Wong Hopman's class. Well, no, that's good to know, because one thing we've uncovered during our Career Day series is just how much ideas and things that happen to us along the way can help shape where we want the direction that we take in our careers. So you don't have to have a preconceived notion, although interesting that maybe it was there and it rose to the surface later. So I know we don't have we want to talk to our other guests, but I do want to talk briefly, since you're the first lawyer we've had. I know a lot of our students are probably thinking about what they want to do and imagining law school. I believe you went to Yale for law school, is that correct? So can you tell us a little bit about what that, if you can remember, although I know it was just
that long ago,
year, right? It was just last year that you graduated. But can you tell us a little bit about what law school is like? And I think it would be helpful to know too, maybe like what kind of skills do you think are necessary in order to succeed in law school?
Yeah, it's interesting you asked that, because I think law school, what the skills may be necessary to succeed in law school might not be the same skills that are necessary to succeed as a lawyer.
And that's a good point.
I think that's something that's talked about in the field. So I think, you want to think about both of those sets of things. Law school, I was extraordinarily fortunate to be able to go to a law school like Yale, where there were so many opportunities sort of laid at our feet, and I will say, it was extremely challenging at the start to be in a place like that. I hadn't been in an institution quite like that before. There were a lot of old white men literally like etched into the windows of the stained glass windows of the rooms. So there was certainly a lot of, I think having a good inner compass, a good sense of confidence, and then when you don't, making sure that you have a strong circle of support that can remind you of of that when you're feeling low, because law school, even one like Yale, where we didn't have like a curve or anything like that, still and even really grades, still there was a big sense of am I, how did I slip in here? But, I think, obviously having a strong work ethic, being organized, being thoughtful about your work, but I think also knowing how to kind of prioritize what's important to you and go after it. You can't be everybody or do everything, do everything. And I really remember these words that the dean of the law school at the time, Harold Coe, said when we first came in, which was, the epitaph of your generation is going to be that they died with their options open. What did that mean? It said, your job here is actually to close off your options. And obviously you all are, if you're in high school, no, the world is your oyster. But I think as you move along and you're, in college and especially in grad school, you want to really think about what is it that's calling to me? What is it that's calling to, to me to do? What is it that I love to do? What is the passion of mine, and how can I follow that instead of, there are a lot of voices telling you a lot of different things. And I think really being able to hear kind of your inner voice and where it's leading you and work to your strengths is something that will serve you well in law school and also, in any other career path.
Thanks. And another question I have is about law school, no matter where you go, it's something we know is very expensive. And a lot of students may go in with noble intentions and want to make a difference and go into something like immigration law or go into environmental law. But then when they come out with so much debt, realize that, or may take a corporate job because they have loans. Is there anything that would help teens out there now know, like resources they might want to know about now to help prepare, or anything?
Yeah, it's really hard. I mean, that was another, I had all of my law school tuition was in loans, and my immigrant father thought I was nuts for, not going into a corporate job to try to pay those off. But again, I was really fortunate to go to a school, and I to be able to go to a school that had a really strong loan repayment program. So even though my salary didn't allow me to pay off my loans by myself, I paid what I could, and then the school kicked in. And so I would say, like, you should be researching when you're applying to schools and at college, and actually our college loans could be wrapped into that as well. So I think, like, spending time really looking into loan repayment programs, what opportunities are available. There has been a federal loan repayment program up until now, but it's, I'm not sure what that's going to look like in the coming years. It does take work. And I would also say there's, like, really no judgment either. It is very, very hard. And that is a very hard thing about this work and a lot of social justice work, is that especially in a place like LA where the cost of living is so high, some of the salaries, particularly in the nonprofit sector, make it very, very difficult to pursue the work, and also make it unavailable to the people who should be pursuing it the most, or have the most access to it, right? The people with the most lived experience of the communities that we're serving. So I think that's something that a lot of us in the nonprofit sector, I would say some of us, are really working to try to change, because it's the field's detriment, right? That we can't welcome, anybody who really has a passion for this work, because we can't pay livable wages. It's a massive problem.
Yeah. Okay, my last question, I apologize, I've gone over, but my last question for you is, knowing that you work tirelessly to help people, and we thank you for that work, but how do you take care of yourself, and how do you create that distinction, especially now when you're at home, between work and a personal life?
Yeah, it's been a lot harder with COVID, but it's something that I've always really felt has been really important. So I do work long hours, but I also I swim. I have twin toddlers now, so I spend so they really will take you out of work mode and into whatever is very present. I'm not saying that's a different kind of work, but it's been really, really wonderful. I have a really wonderful partner, and I think, like, having a strong relationship both with my spouse and, like, with family and friends is really something that has kept me on course over the years. And yeah, so I guess those things: exercise, family, friends, and I read a lot of novels. Still read all the time.
We love that.
Even through law school, I read a lot. And it takes me to other worlds and other places, and keeps my mind fresh. So.
And we didn't ask her to say that, you guys.
I did.
Thank you so much, Talia, and stick around, because I'm sure our audience has questions for you. So now I'm happy to turn it over to Dawn to introduce our next guest.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Talia. Thank you, Jessica. Our next guest is Kalker. She's the Senior Associate of Policy and Research at Inclusive Action for the city. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to be kind of going back and forth between two screens. Well, welcome, Lyric. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. Really excited to be here.
That's great. I have a lot of questions for you, so we'll see how much we can get through. So, Senior Associate for Policy and Research. What is a Senior Associate for Policy and Research? And can you also, at the same time, also tell us a little bit about your organization and what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So it's a pretty generic term, Senior Associate, but generally speaking, my work fits into like three major buckets. First is research and analysis of policies. Next would be stuff like coalition building. So a lot of the work that I do is with other organizations like Public Counsel, for example. And then the third would be advocacy. So a lot of my work is to try and change policies so that they're better for communities and the people that we care about and serve. Inclusive Action for the City itself is an organization that focuses on economic development and community development. We're based in Boyle Heights, but we do work all over the city and LA County. And it's we have like two sides of our house. So we have the economic development initiatives where we have direct service programs. And then we also have the policy and advocacy side, which feed into one another. So all of the policy that we advocate for is rooted in the needs of our clients and the folks that we're serving.
Awesome. I did a little research. I was poking around on the organization's website. Are there like examples of the research that you've done? I saw that they have some research papers that are available on the site. Are there examples that our folks here can see?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let me, I can pull up a couple of different things. So right now I actually happen to have on my screen. We do a lot of research like based in what our communities need. And so this blog that we did quickly with myself and a colleague of mine is the case for canceling rent. And so we put together a bunch of statistics and kind of build a layered approach as to why we think it makes sense to advocate for a certain policy. So in this instance, it was for canceling rent. We did a lot of stuff on opportunity zones. Here, let me find one of those. Where we talked about the policy that's called opportunity zones, and talked through what it meant, because this is a federal policy, but it has local implications. So like opportunity zones in Los Angeles are going to affect people in Los Angeles, right? And this particular blog was to understand more of how small businesses are affected, especially in low-income communities, as like investments are made in neighborhoods.
Awesome, thank you, and I really appreciate that you had all of those ready to go. Can you just walk us through, it sounds like there's a few different sort of aspects to your job. You know, there's the research, there's also the coalition building. Can you just walk us through like what's a day in the life like for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So similar to Talia, it's definitely changed since COVID. But prior to COVID, a lot of it was definitely spent in meetings in coalition with different organizations that we work with. So for example, in my background is the Los Angeles Street Vendor Campaign. That's one of our most successful campaigns to date. And the coalition consists of a number of organizations, but there's like 4 in the steering committee. So on a day-to-day basis, we might have meetings. Before COVID, it would be in person, but now it's on Zoom. And we talk about our strategy. So like how it is that we're going to try and advocate for a different policy, or like what does it look like to implement a new program for street vendors. Yeah, so that would be on that particular coalition. In other coalitions, we have a much broader focus. So with the street vending campaign, it was singularly to legalize street vending, which has a very specific approach to how to make that happen. For the broader coalitions, we have like full strategy teams that talk about how to push forward a set of policies versus just one policy. And that involves definitely a lot more meetings and coordinating among different professionals in the field, whether it's organizations or individuals, and then also being able to like set up meetings with like elected officials or offices of elected officials. Yeah, that's probably the coalition side of it and coalition building. But then the research is just like desk research. So it might be looking on doing some research on the internet. It might be interviewing someone and being able to hear an expert in the field and what it is that they've been experiencing. It's also talking to community members when we're able to. With COVID, it's definitely a little bit harder, but prior to this, we would have been able to talk to like my clients, for example, or our clients for our economic development initiatives and hear the experiences that they're having, especially folks like street vendors and other low-income entrepreneurs, to see how we can better advocate for them.
Awesome, thank you. So I don't know about anyone else, but just hearing about like the range of work that you and the organization does, like to me, it's very, very overwhelming. I'm kind of curious about, does this mean that you have an area of, I don't know, want to say like expertise, but like, are there areas that you do focus on? Like, and are there other people on your team that sort of focus on other areas, or do you find that this is sort of the work where you do have to be able to be flexible and research and understand a lot of different aspects of what's involved?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for inclusive action, we definitely stick to economic development. So the stuff that we do is tied to just generally getting access to capital for folks, typically low-income communities of color. For our programs involved with that, our economic development programs, it's for folks who wouldn't have access to stuff like a Chase Bank or a Wells Fargo or a credit union maybe, and being able to give responsible and healthy capital to small business owners who just wouldn't otherwise have access to that. That lens and the policy lens that we bring with that is tied to stuff like street vending, right? So street vendors are small businesses. And so how do we advocate for these micro businesses and small businesses in a responsible way that centers their needs? And that's, I think, one of the reasons coalitions are so powerful is because we're able to work with folks who have other expertise. So for example, we work with an organization called Community Power Collective, and they're organizers. So they do a lot of the organizing of the street vendors, and that's a totally different skill set than I have. I'm very much a like policy analysis type person, but they're more on the ground with vendors, talking to them and giving them updates on different policies and organizing them to show up to meetings and stuff like that. Whereas public counsel, our colleagues at public counsel, there are lawyers, and so they help and make sure that all the policies we advocate for have the right language in them to ensure that vendors are at the forefront. So similar to the work that Talia does for immigrants' rights, our colleagues at public counsel ensure that vendors have rights instilled in all the policy that we advocate for.
Thank you. I think this is definitely like very deep for this particular audience to hear, especially like understanding how to do this sort of team-based work. I also want to like hear a little bit more from you about like your background. If I remember correctly, did you go to Parsons? Was that?
Yeah, I did. I got my master's at Parsons School of Design. So that's over in New York. It's actually known for fashion, and I did not get a fashion degree. I got my degree in, it's called Design and Urban Ecologies, but it's really just urban design or critical urban design. But I was in the fashion building with all the fashion designers and stuff, and just really wild. Two different worlds, really. But yeah, Parsons was great. It was like right in the middle of New York in like, yeah, I guess downtown New York. And yeah, it was a fantastic place to be able to learn a lot of the skills that I'm being able to use now, and especially in centering people who are affected by policy in the policy advocacy. So the program itself is around partnering with community members and community organizations to then make change, like help communities make change in the way that they want to make change. So that's pretty much what I did at Parsons.
That definitely sounds very perfect for the work that you're doing right now.
Yeah.
At what point did you figure out that this was the sort of work that you wanted to do? And then can you talk also about like what are the other steps, whether it's school work or life experience that sort of led you to that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I did get my undergraduate degree at UC San Diego in urban studies and planning, but I really actually wanted to do architecture. And I went to architecture school for a second and then decided it was not for me and then left and went to go work at a consulting firm to do some public works consulting. And in my time in public works consulting, I was doing a lot of stuff around local hire, which is for big construction projects, bringing in folks from the community to work in the construction field to build those infrastructure projects, right? And it was great, and I learned a ton. But one of the things I noticed was that I probably preferred to be on the policy side of it versus the side that like is receiving the policy, if that makes sense. So local hire is it's like the outcome of a lot of advocacy that had to happen. And I instead wanted to be on the advocacy side, knowing what I saw on the outcome side. So then I kind of looked into it and figured out what makes the most sense and did research about organizations I was really interested in and saw what the credentials of folks in those different organizations were and talked to different people in, in different places, and also volunteered. So I spent a lot of time volunteering with the organizations to see what made most sense to me, like what was it I was most passionate about. And at that point in time, I was like 25, I think. So this was after, this was a few years after I graduated from undergrad. and then saw that a lot of the folks had a master's degree. And so I was like, okay, maybe I should go get my master's degree. But definitely second what Talia was talking about in terms of loans, that's certainly something to look out for, because masters can be very, very expensive, because that's typically where a lot of universities will make their money. Yeah.
Thank you. We're coming close to the end, so I'll just wrap up with one more question. So a lot of the folks that are here today, they're either teens or just recently out of high school. For anyone that may be interested in this type of work, do you have any recommendations for them, sort of tips, like how would they get into this field?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say volunteering is a really great way, especially if you have the time and capacity to do so. So there's that side of it, and like figuring out which organizations you want to work with. The other thing is like figuring out a field that you want to work in, because like inclusive action is very much in economic development, but there's a ton of organizations who do similar things when it comes to like tenants' rights. So like for renters or for homeowners maybe, or if you're really passionate about rights for the unhoused, there's a ton of organizations that work on rights for the unhoused. And like Public Counsel, for example, does a ton of immigrants' rights work. So figuring out what topic that you're most interested in, and then being able to talk to the people in the field would be really, really beneficial. And just reading a lot. There's a ton of like local news organizations that talk about a lot of this stuff, and will like link to the different people who are in the field doing the work. Good ones are like LA Taco, Curbed LA doesn't really exist anymore, but Curbed, City Lab does some cool stuff. It's not specific to LA, but yeah, LA Times, obviously we have a colleague from LA Times here. Yeah, I think those are really good ways to get involved with this work.
Awesome. Thank you very, very much, Lyric. I know I want to talk with you so much more, but because of time, we're gonna
Sure.
it. But for anyone, if you have any questions for Lyric, please, by all means, go ahead, put them in the chat, and we'll have time at the very end for a Q&A with everyone. So thank you very much. So I'll also be talking with our next guest, is Yungsuhn Park. She is the Chief Deputy Secretary for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. So welcome, Yungsuhn. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So you have another title that I think it needs like a little bit of unpackaging. Chief Deputy Secretary. Can you tell me and tell us a little bit about what that means, and also what the labor, and thank you also for putting the name of your agency right behind you as well, the Labor and Workforce Agency. If you could talk a little bit about who they are and what they do.
Sure. So the labor agency really doesn't have a lot of name recognition, but we oversee a lot of departments that you might recognize. Basically, all government programs and services that touch employment, jobs, workers and employers really all somehow will interact with our agency, and that includes the EDD, where you file for unemployment, the Labor Commissioner's Office, where you file a claim if you haven't been paid the wages that you have a right to, such as minimum wage and overtime, as well as workers' compensation if you get hurt on the job. So the labor agency is the umbrella organization over all of the state's employment programs. And our agency is headed by the labor secretary, who is on the governor's cabinet and advises the governor on anything and everything related to labor and workforce. So we're part of the executive branch of state government, and we work closely with the legislative branch to come up with new policies, particularly in this pandemic, where economic recovery and protecting workers who are on the job is really critical. We're very busy working on implementing new laws, as well as developing new initiatives to expand outreach, as well as opportunities for workers across the state. And my role is really to help lead the team. We're a small but mighty team at Labor Agency that works hand in hand with other agencies, with community-based organizations like the ones that are represented here today to come up with really what are some of those high priorities that we can bring to fruition together.
Thank you. So you are working for an agency. It's a state level agency. It affects all of California. Can you talk a little bit about like how, and I imagine that things have changed in the last few months. Can you talk a little bit about like how you and your team did their work across the entire state, and how is it being done now?
Sure. So I did used to travel quite a bit to Sacramento and loved meeting with folks in the community in person. And now we are pretty much working remotely. And so it is definitely something that we miss. It's just all of the personal engagement. But we find that with all of the demands on our work, it really doesn't hold us back from working across regions in teams. Everything is virtual now, just like it is for school. So in a way, it's just actually allowed us to really focus on the challenges and worry less about logistics, since we used to just spend a lot of time traveling and getting to places. Now we're just a click away, for better or for worse, from our meetings.
So the agency also, and you had mentioned this, that it works with a number of other agencies like throughout the state. Can you just walk us through like, what does your typical day look like?
Sure. So I feel really fortunate in that we're able to be pretty creative on the job in coming up with new solutions to old challenges, and really working in partnership with people inside state government and also outside state government to really be collaborative. So I work on everything from communication strategy. How do we get the word out about, for example, new rights that a lot of workers have to paid sick leave, so that if they have been exposed or are sick with COVID, that they're not forced to go to work just to get paid. And so there's, communications and outreach work that we do. I also get to work with technology and IT departments and companies to think about IT solutions to make our services more accessible and more efficient. And then also meet with organizations like those represented here today to learn about their concerns and really learn from their research and advocacy. So there's really a wide range of people and agencies that we meet with. Currently, right now, I work very closely with the California Department of Public Health, because workers' well-being is right now, it's the same thing as public health because of the pandemic and how we are all in this together. And then I also work with the Department of Food and Agriculture, who has, who engages employers so that when we do outreach to farm workers about their rights and protections on the job, that we're sending the message to employers as well. So those are just a couple of the agencies that we work with within state government to further workplace protections and opportunity.
Thank you. So if I remember correctly, you've been in this position for about a year and change, something like that. And it's been a very eventful period. Just like you just alluded to, COVID-19, also just Assembly Bill 5, which affects whether a person's considered an employee or a contractor. And I'm wondering if what have been like the highlights so far of this position, and what have been the challenges?
Wow, so there's definitely been a lot of challenges, and Dawn, it sounds like you've done quite your research on some of the issues that we're focused on as kind of captured on our website. So in terms of the highlights, I just really enjoy bringing community and worker voice to state government. So, I grew up as an activist, as a daughter of an immigrant family, and I was really passionate about student activism and workers' rights way before I went to college and law school. And so having people with that passion, bringing them into state government so that they can influence these broad state level policies is something that I'm really passionate about. And so I just want to say to all of the listeners out there, and Talia and Lyric, I love trying to recruit fantastic, brilliant advocates, that we need people with passion, with the lived experiences of the communities that we serve to come into state government. And there's really a role for everyone in state government in that whatever your passion is, whether it's in public health and science, or whether it is in labor law and policy, or immigration, or education, right? You're passionate about public education and the policies that dictate things like access to remote learning. All of these, any issue you care about somehow is affected by state government and our agencies. So just want to really encourage everyone to think about, you know, both, of course, the private sector opportunities that are out there, the nonprofits that do the critical work on the ground in the field, but also the state government that runs all of these programs that sometimes are not as visible, but at the same time can really be influenced by people with a really proactive mindset that want to bring kind of their family's experience to bear and use that to inform the way state policies and programs are set up. So that's really the highlight of my job, is being able to bring people and increase access to state opportunities. There's a lot of career pathways, and there are also opportunities for those without a college education. So you don't have to have that higher degree to start a career. And so I'm going to put a link to some YouTube videos in the chat that just walk you through the process of applying for state jobs, because we really do need more diversity in the state workforce, and just want to make sure that everyone's aware of opportunities, because oftentimes if you don't know someone that works for the state government, it is hard, it's a little bit mysterious, and you may not find a way to apply without some extra help. And so those are some of the highlights, really the team that we're building and the diversity that we're bringing to the state. In terms of challenges, it is really intense. There are many times where I never feel like I do enough, given the weight and the breadth of the challenges that we're facing right now. All of the workers who are putting themselves at risk, who are not being paid their due wages, who are not being given opportunities for upward mobility, those are all things that I always know we can be doing more to address. And so sometimes that keeps me up at night, just thinking about how much more there is to do, and just feeling the weight of that. But really, that's really the passion that I try to channel into the work.
Thank you for sharing all that, and also for the YouTube resources. That would be super. Can you also talk a little bit about like your path leading to this? Because you have a unique background, because you've worked in both the private sector, the private not-for-profit sector, as well as the public sector. Can you just walk everyone through sort of like your past like schooling, work, and how you got to this current position?
Sure. So I don't want to go too far back, but I was born and raised in LA in Echo Park. Just want to give a little shout out to anyone who's born and raised in LA, went through LAUSD, K through 12. I was part of the magnet program, so got bussed around the whole city, and really grew up just seeing injustice everywhere. It was just part of my reality that, you know, my family didn't have the same access to resources, to legal services, that often I was the, you know, family interpreter and the bridge to whether it was government or other business services for my parents. Our family's business was looted in 1992 during the riots, and I was only 12 at the time, but that really imprinted on me and seeded in me a desire to understand why that happened. And it really led me to study a lot more about the civil rights movement and all of our local and state and national history that really gives context to the moment that we're in now with all of the racial injustice, the activism, the immigrant stories that really fill in all of that context for why we see some of the inequity that we do now. And so I just really grew up seeing all of that and was looking for a way to channel my energy, really wanted to have an impact. And so when I met an attorney who was a social justice activist, who was also a workers' rights attorney, that just kind of turned on a switch for me that that was a path that I wanted to pursue. So in college, I started learning about, you know, what it took to go to law school and find that opportunity after law school to get that nonprofit civil rights job like Talia. And it's true, you have to beat the odds to do that because a lot of the legal careers are not, are really kind of oriented towards more commercial or corporate law, but you know, definitely had the support of mentors to do that. And so I did practice civil rights and workers' rights litigation for 8 years, and then really pushed myself to be and try to learn to be a good lawyer. But really, after some soul searching, decided that that it wasn't really what gave me a lot of joy, that there were other ways that I could channel my passion. And so when I had an opportunity to join the state and really work on a lot of the same issues, but from a different vantage point, and to work internally to try to change and transform organizations internally at the state, I got really passionate about that, and that's what led me to my current role.
Thank you for sharing all that. We are also just about hitting the end of the time, so I'll close out with one more question. And it's a similar question before. For the folks here, especially like some of the folks, they are, you know, probably not that much older than you were like during the riots. Like, so they may be thinking about a career like this, or they may be having a lot of these similar questions, especially in light of what's happening. Do you have any recommendations, any tips, any sort of wisdom to share?
Any final tips? Is that the question?
Yeah.
I say that it's really, I so much of what Talia and Lyric shared resonated with me. I think really trying to reflect on your story, what matters to you, what brings you joy, what gives you sense of purpose, I think is really a question that you're never done answering, right? Even as people with many years in our career, we're still asking ourselves that question: what more do I want to learn? Where am I passionate so that I'll embrace the challenge? And so those are just, I think, questions that we have to embrace, right? That we'll never be done asking ourselves those questions, but being able to kind of reflect and think about how your life experiences really, you know, inform your identity and what you find, where you want to channel your passion, I think is just what can keep you going, given that there's so many challenges that we're facing day to day, at home, at work, at school, in this unprecedented time, that just really thinking about what drives you at your core, I think is one of the best ways to bring your kind of academic and professional pursuits in alignment with who you are as a person.
Awesome. Thank you, Yungsuhn. And thank you to all of our guests, Lyric, Talia. Thank you so much. I think I'm going to turn it back over to Lynn and Jessica.
Yes, wow, that was so amazing. Thank you so much to all of our amazing guest speakers. Now is the time for our questions. I did take down 2 questions from our audience earlier that typed it in. But if you do have questions, definitely type that in the chat box and we'll get to it. If it's a very specific question, you are also welcome to raise your hand and I'd be happy to unmute you. All right, so the first question here from SD came earlier, said, so this question's for you, Talia. Do you fear for your security in the jail locations? For instance, in retaliation from jail guards?
Funny you asked that. Not generally, but I did get retaliated against from a guard, and I actually got kicked out of the jail for several months. And it was a big learning experience for me. You know, all my colleagues said, well, that's the sign that you're obviously doing something right. You know, if they're saying that you're like disrupting the orderly operation of the facility, clearly you're doing something right. So I have experienced, some of that retaliation, but it's not something I worry about on the daily. You know, you're there to do a job, you're there, you're there to serve, and so it's not something I worry about on the daily, but it does. It is real. The power dynamics in those, in the prisons are real, and they are, they can be dangerous, but the people who are most vulnerable to them are not me, are not the ones coming in with the law degree. It's the people who are behind the bars. So I try to keep focused on that.
That's very true. Thank you for that. I hope that answers your question. The other question I have here is from Diana. This is for Talia. If you don't have much experience with law in high school, would it be a good idea to pursue a career of becoming an immigration lawyer? So I'm assuming that Diana is a high school student.
I had no experience with the law in high school, so I certainly don't think it's a requirement, or even knowing like in college that I wanted to go to law school. So I would say definitely don't cut it off just because you haven't had the experience yet. And I know even at places like public counsel, a lot of times our internship opportunities are more open to people who are already law students. Sometimes there are opportunities also for people at earlier stages. So I think, people understand that. I think it's more like at the earlier stages in high school and college, kind of figuring out more like, what is it that makes me happy to do on the day-to-day? Like, do I like to write? Do I like to be talking to people and be out in the world? Do I like to read? Like, what are the kinds of things that I like to do? For me, I was talking to one of the individuals here, like I like to learn different languages and speak them. And for me, I learned that, and I knew I wanted to integrate that somehow into my career. So I think maybe, thinking about those things at this stage in high school, kind of like, what is it that makes you happy on the day-to-day, and then kind of like taking the next step as you're moving forward to be thinking about, well, how does that translate into a career path? But
Thank you. This question came into me from a person, anonymous. Do you need a translator if your client doesn't speak English? This is for Talia.
This probably is true across. Language justice is something that's absolutely critical in our work, and it's something that's not focused on enough. So yes, there are times when I don't speak the language of people that I'm working with, and we do have to work through translators, particularly with people who speak Indigenous languages, which is a large part of our community here in Los Angeles. I would say there are a lot of, if this is something you're interested in, there's a group called Antenna LA that looks at language justice and thinks about it. They do translation interpretation, but they also like take a really justice focused approach to like what it means to be working with people in different languages and across cultures. So I would commend their work to you as well. But yes, we do use interpreters and translators at times.
Thank you. Are there any more questions from our audience? Oh, okay. LA Times. So, Natalie here. Anatoly, I know you're always here. LA Times reported on Prop 21 recently, describing potential challenges to its passage. What are the positives and negatives of repealing the Costa-Hawkins Act, giving local governments power over rent control? So I'm not sure if Lyric or Talia or even Yungsuhn, if you want to answer this.
I could probably take a pass.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Costa-Hawkins was put into effect in 1995, and it doesn't allow for rent control for buildings that were built after 1995. It also doesn't allow for the update of rent control ordinances that were already in place. And Los Angeles already had a rent control ordinance in place when this came into effect, and it was put in place and not updated since 1978. So that means that the rent control ordinance in Los Angeles is dated back to 1978. the positives and negatives, I could definitely speak a little bit more to the positives of repealing Costa-Hawkins, but that comes from the research that I do. And I'm sure there are other folks who'd be able to speak more to the negatives, but for the positives is the ability to have local control over what makes the most sense. So something like housing in Los Angeles costs a very different amount than housing in Fresno. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to have the same laws apply to rent control in Fresno as they do to Los Angeles because cost of living is so different. One of the really big arguments against repealing Costa-Hawkins is a supply and demand. So like a traditional economic standpoint, saying that it'll not allow for more development of housing because people don't want to develop. That is intrinsically tied to making sure that people profit off of housing. And so changing that, I don't think actually deters folks from building housing because it's still going to be profitable because we haven't changed our system to allow for it to not be profitable. Yeah, so there's a whole, I actually might have written a report about this, so I could send the report. I'll find it real quick. But yeah, it's from the last time Costa-Hawkins was on the ballot in 2018.
Wonderful, we'd love to read it. All right, and maybe this could be for, let's see, Esty here asked, while you're looking that up, Esty here asked, what are the salary ranges for people who work in the advocacy field? I didn't know if anybody wants to take a stab at that.
I can, because we just did a little bit of, or not a little bit, we're doing equity work across our agency. We still have a lot more to do, but one of the big things that we fought for was at least a minimum salary for anybody in the agency. So this is not like a lawyer's salary. This is like just like any, but lawyers are about that too. So our minimum salary at public counsel is now $50,000. I can't remember first, I think starting lawyers are around there. Maybe it's like 52 or 53, something like that. Might be a little bit higher, but it's, yeah. So it's definitely not, when I started, my salary when I started, I think was 45 or something like that. So something like that. And that's also something to think about in terms of when you're talking about the different careers. Like one, I think really good thing about going into government work, like what Yungsuhn was talking about, like there is a lot more job stability. I think the salaries tend to be higher and the benefits tend to be a little bit better. So if that's like a piece of what you're weighing, I think that's something to think about.
Thank you. And I have a question here. Do any of the guest speakers have suggestions on how teens can engage on these topics, such as immigration, workers' rights, whether or not they're eligible to vote? We all have a lot of social justice-minded teens in our midst here. Do you want to speak on that? I'll have Yungsuhn speak since we've been having our other guest speakers speak on topics.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm biased towards activism since that's really my story. But, and I know activism looks a lot, different in the COVID world. So I think there's just this power that you feel when you're with others who are speaking out, who are taking action, whether it's in a march or otherwise, or, doing an online petition, or, in a more personal, private ways, bringing up some tough topics with people that you care about, but you disagree with. I just think that there's so many ways for us to be activists about issues that we care about on a daily basis, and just encourage, I think it was Lyric who said to read about the issues, read both sides, read the academic papers, read the journalism, read the blogs, and just get knowledgeable about it. I think we all have seen how social media isn't always the best way to get your information. And so looking for other information sources that can help you really be empowered to be more informed and ready to lead in that space. Just a few thoughts there.
Thank you. How about for you, Lyric?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think reading is definitely a really good way to get involved in local journalism is also really great. I know that's where I get a lot of my own sources is through local journalism, but definitely agree with Yungsuhn on reading both sides, because it's really important to understand the full argument in order to like make your own analysis of the situation, right? And then I would also add in that being critical of the stuff that you're reading, because everything is written from a certain perspective. Like the link I just put in the chat, I wrote that. And so you guys have seen me talk and you see what I'm passionate about and stuff like that. So that, you know, it comes from a very specific lens. And I would argue that's just a thing you should be doing generally, not just in the social justice world, but generally just looking at things with a critical lens. But back to getting involved, definitely volunteering, reading. If you can get internships, definitely get internships. And then also informational interviews. If there's people you're really interested in and you like the work that they're doing, just ask them if you can have a little bit of their time. You can learn a lot from someone in 30 minutes. So.
Thank you for that. How about for you, Talia?
Yeah, I echo what the others have said, but I think, particularly in the immigrants' rights space, there's so many opportunities to really get on the ground and get involved, like, no matter what age you are, no matter, where, whether you're able to leave your house or not, there's so much work we have to do right now, like immediately, to really to save lives and to create a more just society. So I think if you're not already hooked up to some of the different advocacy organizations, United We Dream is a great national organization for young people in the Untitled space. I think Lynn mentioned there's somebody maybe from IC4IJ, Inland Coalition for Immigrant Justice on here. I haven't seen the whole gallery view, but if you're there, awesome. Joining local advocacy groups, helping to volunteer. So IC4IJ is one. CIRLA is a membership-based group in Los Angeles, the Coalition for Humane Immigrants' Rights Los Angeles. Signing up for some of, for some of those listservs. So you see there's constantly send outs for opportunities to call your local congresspeople. You don't have to be a voter to call them to say, like, I care. I'm a high school student and I care about what's happening in my community. And, so you can, join the ACLU if you want, you get their membership card there. But I would say, try to connect with some of the either local or national groups, and they will give send outs and they will have lots of ideas for, protests you can show up to, phone calls you can make. And I do think it's important for lawmakers and for the community to hear from young people. You're the future, and we need to know, what you think and what kind of a world you want to be living in. And I think it's important to start speaking out about that,
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. Oh, Talia, I just want to build on that. I do want to echo what Talia just said to the teens out there, because I think a lot of us don't realize how important it is to contact our local and state legislators. We often think about what's happening on the federal level, but really a lot of the policies in the city and state are going to affect us even more. So I've seen teens make the phone calls to state legislators. It's really powerful. It'll probably change the way you see things too. Anyway, but I also want to thank every one of our guest speakers today, because I think this is a great way for our audience to see that there's so many different avenues you can pursue. You don't have to go to law school in order to change lives in this way for people who really need it, but that is one avenue. But it's great to see all of your different backgrounds and the choices that you've made to, help people. And we really appreciate your work, the work that you're doing out there. So thank you. And thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah. I have one last question I'm going to get from James here. I'm going to unmute him since he raised his hand, and then we'll go ahead and we'll conclude our program shortly. Okay, so James, go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, yes. I'm an engineer, but I haven't been working for many years because of a disability. But I'd love to get into this type of work, but I'm an engineer too. Is there a tacit blacklist of joining this career field? Because, for instance, like I would really love to, advocate for or work for a peace organization, but then I'm wondering how my career prospects will be if I try to work for a defense contractor.
Who would like to take
Are you saying that are you saying you have worked for a defense contractor, but you want to
No, not yet.
kind of switch? Okay.
But and I got my go ahead.
Oh, so I don't know that much about that, like engineering in particular. So I want to kind of speak more generally to the sense that I do think that people kind of go from one end of the spectrum to the other, and it's doable. But yes, sometimes there are kind of networks of people who may want to better understand why, like how you're connecting your work history to your current interests. So I would just say I don't think that there should be something like a blacklist, but definitely there may be questions about kind of what your interests are and how your past experience connects to your current interests if you're switching from kind of one end of the spectrum to the other. But maybe, I don't know, I'll stop there and let others speak to it.
Thank you. Does Talia or even Lyric, do you guys have any suggestions?
You know that I have much to add to what Yungsuhn said. I think that's right. I think you always want to be thinking about, if you're switching fields. And and there's actually been a question that's come around on listserv that I'm on, like, would anybody here ever hire like a former ICE attorney or a former USCIS officer? That's still kind of within our field. And there's been like an active debate about like whether, some people would do that or some people wouldn't. So, I think it depends on the agency that you work for. I think it depends how you sort of explain and contextualize your past experience. But I don't think it should stop you from pursuing your passions. Like, I think, there, if this is work, you want to get involved in, then, I think it's worth pursuing. So.
Thank you, Talia. Lyric, did you want to add anything to that, or you're good? Okay. All right. I am going to go ahead, and I know we're way over our time, so I would like to thank everybody for coming to our program today for our virtual career day series. And I would like to thank all of our amazing guest speakers, Talia, Lyric, and Yungsuhn. Thank you for being with us today and for sharing your life experience with us, and I hope that it's inspired most of our, or at least all of our participants here today to, take on a job, follow their passion, and whether it's in law, immigration, public policy, advocacy, anything that they are really passionate about, that they now have the tools and the answers to go and chase that dream. So with that being said, I just want to remind everybody, we do have a survey we'd love for you to fill out. At the very end of the survey, I do have a section asking if you'd like to be added to our Med Talks program. So we started Med Talks a few weeks ago, inviting special guest speakers to talk about mental health. Last week, we had our amazing guest speaker talk about diet and nutrition. And then we do have another guest speaker from LA County USC Medical Center coming on next week to talk about women's health. So if you'd like to be added to that guest list or to that email listserv, please let me know. I'll add you to my email list. It's been really, moving to have that kind of program because we're talking about health and it's for everybody. Anybody can attend that program. So yeah, we'll go ahead and we'll conclude the program here. I will make the recording available onto our YouTube page at Los Angeles Public Library. And if you guys have questions, thank you for submitting the survey. Thank you guys for coming today. And if you guys have questions, you all have my email. And I'm sure if you'd like to find our guest speakers on LinkedIn, what's the best way for all of our audience members to contact you guys if they have questions? Do you have a LinkedIn account?
I don't, and I'm not even on Facebook. Here, I can give you my work email.
That's okay.
We want to
I'm not
compliment
like
you
a
on that,
social
Talia.
media like Neanderthal.
That's okay. That's okay.
You should talk about that, though. I mean, that's pretty great. I think that's probably saved you a lot of headaches. No?
Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our amazing guest speakers. Oh, and they're putting in their emails in the chat box. So if you have questions and you want to reach out to them for more information, please do reach out to them. They're so open and they're so friendly and they're so amazing, and they want to help you. So definitely feel free to contact them. And Jessica and I, we're going to hang out here for the next 5 minutes. If you guys have questions for us, let us know. You can type that in the chat box and we can unmute you and you can raise your hand. And our next career day is going to be on, are we having the FBI? Oh my goodness. Yes. So my friends over at the FBI are coming on October 14th. They will be speaking about what it's like to be an undercover investigator. So we'd love for you to come to that. If you're already on my email list, I will definitely email you the Zoom link. Yes, super cool. All right, and Talia, Yungsuhn, Lyric, thank you so much. No, you're so much cool. You guys are all so cool, and I love that it's all women today. Oh, all right. If anyone who's watching wants to tell about their experience at the time. Oh, yes. So guys, my friend Nita is here from the LA Times. She asked if anyone who's watching wants to tell me about their experiences spending time with the library on Zoom. Oh man, I'd love to hear from you. You can
I'm afraid.
You can reach me at citybeat@latimes.com. So Citybeat is the name of her column. Yeah, this is so cool. I think we do have a lot of loyal followers for our career day. I thought of Aria but most are underage, if anything, so we'll have to get parents' permission. But yeah, you guys, need to put her email there, so definitely feel free to reach out to her. All right, I'm gonna let Talia, Yungsuhn, and Lyric go. You guys are so amazing. Thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you, Jessica and Don, for helping us host. And yeah, we love you guys. Thanks for always being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you guys. And I'll email you guys all soon. Yes. I'm like Nita, if you want to unmute yourself, I'll definitely unmute you. Yeah, let me see. Hopefully you don't quote me on anything. Nita, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for having me here.
Yeah, so
Really
happy to have you.
interesting to watch. I've been popping into a lot of different library Zoom events over the last few days just to get a sense of all the offerings out there.
Oh, cool.
And the upside of the pandemic, in that a lot of people who might not be able to get to a library branch for a live event are coming to these Zoom events, and I think that's kind of a beautiful thing to see.
Yes, and I have to say the most amazing thing is we're getting people from all over, not just Los Angeles, but even
The world,
in other, yeah, all over the world. Yes,
Yes.
yes, we have people come from all over the world coming to our program. So it's been really eye-opening, and it's so amazing to meet all kinds of people that I would never have thought to meet in person.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
and
been
there's
wonderful.
something so beautiful in some of the classes where more of the cameras are on, just to see the diversity of LA in people's kitchens and bedrooms. And I was just in a class a few minutes before yours where it was a gardening class, but one of the people was preparing artichokes in her kitchen while she was watching live video of Master Gardener in her Venice garden, and it was kind of amazing to see it.
I love that. That is so amazing. Oh my goodness. So, so what brings you to? I know you recently wrote an article. Our boss sent it to us, and I just have to say it was so amazing just to read. What you wrote about the women who went to go get their citizenship.
Yeah.
So
I interviewed a lot of people for the library for that story, and I had originally thought that it was sort of going to be a layered story that would be partly about Clemencia and partly about the library, and then Clemencia's story just took over. So I thought there's all this wonderful stuff I've learned about what the library is doing right now, and I want to give it its own space, and that's what I'm doing for this Saturday.
You're so amazing. Thank you for bringing light to all of our, to our library. Well,
I hope that one of the things that will happen is that people who read it, who don't know all these things that are going on at the library right now, only know that their libraries are closed, will realize that there's all sorts of other ways that they can be involved with the library and pick up books at the library and all of that. So I'm hoping that will be a part of it.
Yeah, we're also, I know Lynn and I are both, and Dawn too, we all have our own groups of teens, like teen councils. So we're all trying to engage civically. Like I have a group that they're trying to promote voting and pre-registration amongst the high school population. So it's nice to see that, like, even in spite of the circumstance, that we're still able to capture the teens' enthusiasm to be on Zoom for that extra hour or so at the library each week. So yeah.
And the teen councils are through the library as well?
Yeah, so typically like young adult librarians will host a teen council as part of our job. So yeah. I mean, we each kind of do a different thing, but
however you want to shape.
However it's working out. But yeah, like right now I have about 15 kids, and we've been meeting weekly to talk about doing another kind of civic engagement program. And right now we're focused on just raising awareness about voting and pre-registering to vote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're at which branch, Jessica?
I'm at the Palisades branch.
That's the other thing that I love, that people who are, in South LA can hop into a Westwood event and all over the place like that those are things that might not happen so naturally.
Exactly.
Sometimes at the central library, but not at all these branches of,
And it's good for the teens too, to meet kids from other schools, outside of their bubbles, and it's great.
Yeah.
Super, super wonderful. And I'd like to add that even Jessica, Dot, and myself, we started working together into this pandemic, and before that we've never even met
in person. Yeah, Lynn and I haven't met.
We're like, hey, you want to work together? You want to get some ideas going? And next thing you know,
what I'm hearing, that there's just a lot of creative ideas bubbling to the surface now as people try to figure out what to do here. That people are linking up who were never linked up before, and just coming up with things in the moment. Yeah, I think that's exciting. So I want to write, I'm trying to write, there are obviously some really hard downsides for this. One of them being the people who really depend on the library, who don't have access to Wi-Fi or anything, the unhoused people among us who are in the libraries every day, the people who, who come in for their maybe one social interaction a day, that's a real loss right now. But there's all this beautiful stuff happening that might lead to real positives in the future of continuing these kinds of online courses when you don't have to anymore, so that people have this kind of access across the city, especially in a city that's so hard to navigate a lot of the time.
I agree. Nita, maybe we should bring you on as a guest speaker for our career day one of these days.
I'd be happy to do that.
Now that we know where to find you.
Now you know where to find me. I'll tidy up my background a little bit.
Oh my goodness. One of our guest speakers still here asked, what kind of opportunities are there in the LA Times right now for college graduates?
You know, there are always, we have internships, and we have a program called the MetPro program, which is designed to bring in a diverse group of young journalists into the paper. So those are good opportunities. And it's a really, as it is in a lot of society right now, as everybody's examining whether they are diverse enough